AITA. When I wanted to pay for our family dinner, my sister said I was their wallet. After that, I just got up and left the entire bill with them. I've never had a problem paying for family dinners. I mean, it's family. It was never about money for me. It was about being together, about sharing a meal without anyone having to stress over the bill. Lately, I had been doing pretty well financially, and my family, well, not so much. My parents had retired early due to some health issues, and my siblings, Kate and Tom, were both in difficult spots career-wise. Kate had lost her job a few months ago and had been struggling to find something stable. Tom had been bouncing between different side gigs, never quite landing anything permanent. I knew that money was tight for them, and honestly, I didn't mind stepping up when we went out. It was not a big deal. At least, it had never felt like one. I always saw it as my way of helping out without making it feel like charity. I never wanted them to feel uncomfortable, and I never made a show of it. It was just dinner, just a way for us to sit together and enjoy a meal without anyone worrying about how much it would cost. As long as it felt like we were having dinner as a family, as long as it felt like it mattered to them the way it mattered to me, I had no issue paying. But there was always an unspoken expectation, an understanding that we were here because we wanted to be, not because I was some kind of walking bank account. But last night changed everything. It started off like any other dinner. My mom had suggested that we all get together since it had been a while. We had not gone out in some time, and I figured it would be nice. I was the one who chose the restaurant, carefully picking a place that had great food without being ridiculously expensive. I had done this enough times to know how to balance it, somewhere nice enough that it felt like a treat but not so fancy that it became excessive. Nothing extravagant, nothing flashy. Just a good restaurant where we could sit down, enjoy a meal, and catch up. I made the reservation, showed up on time, and even got there a little early to make sure we had a good table. I had always been the type to think ahead, to plan, to make sure things ran smoothly. It was just second nature to me at this point. I took a seat, checked my phone while I waited, and when the waiter came over, I ordered some water and glanced over the menu, not really thinking much of anything. My family arrived one by one. Mom and Dad were first. They walked in together, my mom smiling warmly as she greeted me, my dad giving me a nod before sitting down. A few minutes later, Kate arrived, her hair still slightly damp like she had rushed to get ready. Then Tom, the last to show up, strolling in without a care in the world, as usual. We all settled in, exchanged the usual pleasantries. How had everyone been, how was work, how was life? It was familiar, easy, the kind of routine that never seemed to change no matter how much time passed. Being with them always felt the same, comforting, predictable, solid. The kind of thing you think will always be there. The moment the waiter handed out the menus, though, something shifted. Kate barely even glanced at me before she laughed, her voice light, casual, like she had said something completely normal. "Oh, Jason is here, so we can charge the most. He's just our walking wallet." She didn't even say it like a joke, not really. There was no hesitation, no awareness of how it might sound. Just a flippant remark, tossed out into the air, followed immediately by laughter. And the worst part? Everyone laughed with her. Even my mother, who usually had more tact, chuckled like it was just harmless fun. There was no awkward pause, no hesitation, just laughter, like they were all in on some long-running joke that I had never been let in on. Tom, never one to miss an opportunity to take things further, smirked. "Well, I guess I'll have the marbled beef steak." "Sister, what do you want?" "Lobster?" They grinned at each other, flipping through the menu like it was a game, like they were daring each other to push it as far as possible. They were not even pretending anymore. They were not even trying to be subtle. This was not about enjoying a meal together. This was about them seeing how much they could get away with before I noticed. How much they could rack up before it became too obvious. I sat there, watching them as they casually rattled off their orders: lobster, steak, high-end appetizers, an expensive bottle of wine. No hesitation, no second thoughts, no awareness. My dad, who had always been the most reserved, did not even blink before nodding along, going along with the routine like it was second nature. Like this was just the way things were. It was so normal to them. That was what hit me the hardest. To them, this was not unusual. This was just how things worked. This was my role. I was not Jason, their brother, their son. I was not the one who had always been there, the one who had stepped in whenever they needed help, the one who had never hesitated to take care of them. I was just the guy who paid. And that was when it clicked. This had never been about family dinners. I smiled. Not the kind of smile that comes from happiness, but the kind of smile that comes when you finally see things for what they really are. "No problem," I said, standing up and straightening my jacket. They barely even looked up, too busy debating between the filet mignon and whatever else would cost the most. I picked up my phone, slid it into my pocket, and glanced at them one last time. "Have a good evening, guys." I turned and walked out. I did not need to look back to know the moment realization hit them. The laughter stopped. The amusement drained. The smugness faded. They did not realize what had happened until I left the restaurant. Update 1. I walked out of that restaurant with a strange sense of peace. No anger, no second-guessing, just clarity. The night air was cool against my skin as I stepped toward my car, the sound of the city humming in the background. I slid into the driver's seat, shut the door, and just sat there for a second, hands resting on the steering wheel. I could still hear their laughter echoing in my mind, the way they had treated me like some bottomless source of money, like I wasn't even a person to them. Just a wallet. Just a means to an end. The phone in my pocket buzzed once. Then again. And again. I didn't even need to check to know who it was. Instead, I turned the key in the ignition, feeling the familiar rumble of the engine beneath me. Pulling out of the parking lot, I merged onto the road, letting the sounds of the city fill the space where their voices had been just moments ago. I wasn't in a rush. I wasn't driving recklessly or angrily. I was just driving. The phone kept buzzing, vibrating against my leg, but I ignored it. I knew exactly what they wanted. They wanted me to turn around, walk back in, laugh it off, swipe my card, and pretend like nothing had happened. Like this was just another night, another meal, another time I willingly played the role they had assigned me. Not this time. The first message popped up on my screen as I slowed to a stop at a red light. Kate. Of course, it was Kate. She had always been the loudest, the quickest to throw a fit when things didn't go her way. "Jason, are you serious?" Another buzz. "What, did you leave? Come back." Buzz. "It was a joke, don't you understand?" I smirked, tossing my phone onto the passenger seat without responding. A joke. Right. It was only ever a joke when the person on the receiving end wasn't the one suffering for it. It was only a joke when they got what they wanted. I had laughed along so many times before, had shrugged off their comments, had let it slide because, at the end of the day, they were my family. But I wasn't laughing now. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the messages had stopped. There was a brief lull, like they were regrouping, figuring out their next move. I grabbed a beer from the fridge, cracked it open, and took a long sip as I walked over to my couch. The coolness of it felt good, grounding. I turned on my TV, flipping through a few options before settling on a series I had been meaning to catch up on. It was nice, just sitting there, doing something for myself for once. No obligations. No expectations. Then the real panic started. It began with my mother. Unlike Kate, she wasn't the type to send rapid-fire texts. No, she went straight to voicemails. The first one came in calm, controlled, but with an undeniable edge of disappointment. "Jason, I don't know what kind of childish prank this is, but come back and close the account." I let the voicemail play out, shaking my head as I took another sip of my beer. A prank. That was rich. As if I was the one treating them like a joke. As if I was the one who had turned them into a walking bank account. I put my phone on silent and focused on my show, letting the voices of fictional characters drown out the real ones trying to claw their way back into my evening. But they weren't done. Not by a long shot. The family group chat, which had been mostly dormant for months aside from the occasional update or forwarded meme, exploded. At first, it was Kate again, demanding that I come back, calling me selfish, telling me I was embarrassing them. Then it was Tom, who tried to be more casual about it, acting like I was just throwing a tantrum over nothing. Then my mom again, but this time the patience was gone. It turned out they had a serious problem. Tom's card was almost maxed out. Kate had no money at all, no surprise there. And Dad, well, he had somehow managed to leave his wallet at home. I could almost picture them sitting there, faces slowly shifting from amused to concerned to outright panicked. The realization creeping in, the understanding that I wasn't coming back, that there was no safety net this time. They must have tried everything. Pleading with the waiters, trying to negotiate, trying to explain. But restaurants don't care about family drama. Restaurants care about being paid. And when it became clear that none of them had a way to settle the bill, the manager was called over. That was when the real desperation set in. The restaurant wouldn't budge. No, they couldn't come back and pay later. No, they couldn't just promise to fix it tomorrow. If they couldn't pay, they had to leave something valuable as collateral. And that was when Kate, fuming, humiliated, out of options, handed over her phone. I didn't even have to imagine it. I could see it so clearly in my mind, her reluctantly pulling it from her bag, slamming it onto the table, glaring at the manager like this was somehow his fault. I could almost hear her voice, snapping at the others, furious that I had put her in this position when, in reality, she had done this to herself. I couldn't help but laugh. Update 1. The next morning, I woke up to the soft glow of my phone screen lighting up the room. The buzz of a notification barely registered in my half-asleep state, but curiosity got the better of me. I reached for my phone, squinting at the screen as my eyes adjusted. A message from Tom. Of course. You acted like an asshole. We're family. You could have just paid the bill instead of putting us in this situation. I stared at the words for a moment, letting them sink in. So now I was the villain. Now it was my fault. The way they saw it, I had humiliated them, abandoned them, left them in a mess that they fully expected me to clean up. Never mind the fact that they had laughed at my expense, that they had treated me like a human ATM, that they hadn't thought for 1 second about how their actions made me feel. No, in their eyes, I was the problem. I was the bad guy because, for once, I refused to play my assigned role. I smiled, tossed the phone back onto my nightstand, and didn't answer. For the first time in a long time, I felt no obligation to explain myself. No need to justify my actions. No urge to smooth things over. I had drawn a line, and they had crossed it. That was on them. I took my time getting out of bed, stretching, walking into the kitchen to make coffee. I had no plans for the day, and I liked it that way. I wasn't going to let last night's nonsense linger in my head. I had done what needed to be done, and they had to deal with the consequences. Then, an hour later, another message came in. This one wasn't from Tom. Jason, let's talk when you're ready. It was from Mom. That was different. She never texted like that unless it was something serious. There was no guilt-tripping, no accusations, just a quiet request. And that made me pause. Despite everything, I knew my mother. She had been laughing at the restaurant last night, sure, but I knew her well enough to understand that if she was reaching out like this, it meant something had shifted. Something had happened. I sat there for a few minutes, staring at the message, debating whether or not to ignore it. A part of me wanted to let them stew in their own mess for a little longer, to make them sit with the reality of what had happened. But there was another part of me, annoyed, frustrated, but still tethered to the idea of family, that wanted to know why she had reached out like this. So I got dressed, grabbed my keys, and drove to their house. As soon as I stepped inside, I felt it. The air was thick with tension, heavy in a way that made my skin prickle. This wasn't just about last night anymore. This was bigger. Dad was sitting in his usual chair, arms crossed tightly over his chest, his expression hard, unreadable. He barely acknowledged me when I walked in. Mom, standing a few feet away, looked tired, more tired than I had seen her in a long time. Not just physically, but in a way that made it seem like the weight of something unseen was pressing down on her. I didn't bother with pleasantries. What's going on? Dad didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at Mom, his expression unreadable, his body stiff. When he finally spoke, his voice was clipped, controlled, like he was holding something back. Are you going to tell him, or should I? Mom let out a slow breath, rubbing her temples, and for the first time, she looked almost guilty. And then the truth came out. Last night, after I left them at the restaurant and the chaos unfolded, Dad had gone home to grab the money to bail them out. But in the process, he had glanced at their bank account, expecting to check balances, maybe move some money around. What he saw blindsided him. Over the past few months, large sums of money had been quietly withdrawn. Not once or twice, but repeatedly. At first, he had assumed it was something related to the house, maybe an unexpected expense, some kind of payment he had forgotten about. But as he kept looking, the pattern didn't add up. And then it hit him. Mom had been funneling money to Kate. Not just a little here and there. Thousands. She had been helping Kate pay off a loan. A loan that no one else had known about. Dad had confronted her the moment he got home. The argument had been instant, explosive. He had demanded answers. How long had this been going on? Why had she kept it a secret? Why was she using their money to clean up Kate's mess without telling him? Mom had defended herself, saying that Kate had been in trouble, that she hadn't known what else to do, that she had been trying to help before things spiraled further. Dad had been furious. You spent our money on this and didn't even tell me? Mom had shot back, just as angry, just as hurt. What was I supposed to do? Watch Kate destroy her life because of debt? And suddenly, everything clicked. Kate, the one who had been the loudest last night. Kate, who had been the first to joke about me being their walking wallet. Kate, who had been so quick to demand that I come back and fix things. She had been drowning in debt, and no one had known. Or rather, Mom had known. And she had been keeping it quiet, covering for her, making sure the rest of us never found out. I exhaled slowly, processing the weight of it. Kate had been reckless. Kate had been hiding something huge. And Mom, instead of making her face the consequences, had been quietly fixing it behind everyone's back. But that was just the beginning. Update 3. After all the insults, the panic, and the scrambling to figure out a way out of the mess they had put themselves in, they had to admit the obvious: without me, they were completely stuck. The restaurant wasn't going to wait forever, and all their attempts to negotiate had led them nowhere. They had no money, no way to pay, and no other option left. The staff had been patient, but patience had its limits. The manager, who had already indulged their desperate bargaining attempts far longer than necessary, was done humoring them. The restaurant was busy, tables were turning, and they were sitting there, a growing inconvenience. Tom had tried to joke his way out of it at first, flashing his signature grin, assuring the waiter that it was just a small misunderstanding, that the money was coming, that there was no need to make a big deal out of it. That had bought them a few extra minutes, but only that. Kate, on the other hand, had gone the indignant route, claiming that it was ridiculous for a restaurant to not allow a tab or some kind of temporary arrangement. But restaurants don't work on trust, and the staff wasn't about to let a group of adults, dressed decently, looking completely capable of paying, walk out with nothing but a promise. At some point, my dad, ever the pragmatist, had stepped in and tried to de-escalate the situation. He had calmly explained that he just needed to get home, grab his wallet, and return. It sounded reasonable, but the restaurant wasn't willing to take the risk. Too many people had probably tried that trick before, never to return. Then the real panic had set in. Tom had pulled out his nearly maxed-out card, hoping that somehow, miraculously, there would be enough credit left to cover the bill. Declined. He had tried again, shifting in his seat, blaming the machine, the bank, anything other than his own inability to manage his finances. Still declined. Kate hadn't even bothered pretending to reach for anything. She knew she had nothing. Dad had nothing on him, and Mom, well, she had stopped trying to pretend she wasn't terrified. So finally, my mother did what I had been expecting from the moment I walked out. She turned to me. The message came in, a simple plea wrapped in quiet desperation. Jason, please help. We can't pay without you. It was predictable, really. First, the laughter, then the anger, then the guilt-tripping, and now the pleading. They had gone through every stage, trying to find the right button to push, the right words to say to get me to do what I had always done, step in, fix everything, and let them walk away unscathed. Kate followed soon after, trying a different angle. Okay, we understand that we went too far. But you will not leave us here embarrassed, right? We are family. Oh, now we were family. Now, when they needed me, when they had no other way out, suddenly the same people who had laughed at me, who had treated me like nothing more than their personal ATM, were pulling the family card. Now it was about loyalty, about sticking together, about doing the right thing. I didn't answer right away. I let them sit with the discomfort for a moment, let them stew in their own self-made disaster. Then, finally, I responded. I will help. But on my terms. They were desperate enough not to argue. Their response was immediate. What are they? I didn't sugarcoat it. No excuses, no dancing around the point. I told them exactly how it was going to go. You all take on an equal share of the bill. I'll pay for myself. But to get the restaurant to let you go, I can temporarily cover the entire amount. And I'll get back every penny from each of you. You have a week. Silence. They were in a stupor, the weight of my words hitting them all at once. This wasn't what they expected. They had assumed I would just grumble, pay up, and let it go. That's how it had always worked before. But this time, the rules had changed, and they didn't like it. Tom was the first to crack, shifting uncomfortably, his tone suddenly defensive. It's just dinner, why are you doing this? As if I was the unreasonable one. As if I was the one making this bigger than it needed to be. As if I hadn't just sat through an entire evening of them mocking me, using me, and then expecting me to clean up their mess. Kate jumped in next, immediately resorting to complaints, saying she didn't have extra money, that I knew her situation, that this was unfair. The excuses poured in like clockwork, the same predictable justifications they had always used whenever money was involved. She went from defensive to exasperated to full-blown outraged, throwing every argument she could think of at me. But I was done with their manipulations. It's not negotiable. Either you agree or figure it out yourself. They knew they had no other choice. The restaurant was waiting, the staff wasn't going to let them walk out without a resolution, and I was their only way out. After a lot of sighing, mumbling, and reluctant nodding, they agreed. I took my time getting back to the restaurant, not because I wanted to make them suffer, but because I wasn't in a rush to clean up their mess. When I arrived, the waiter looked relieved, and I paid the bill in full. I made sure to leave a generous tip, not because of them, but because the staff had been patient and professional through the whole ordeal. Mom, ever the peacemaker, tried one last attempt at smoothing things over as we walked out. Maybe we can just forget about it. I didn't hesitate. I looked her straight in the eye and made myself clear. You have a week. If I don't get my share back, you can stop talking to me at all. They didn't argue anymore. They just nodded, shifting uncomfortably, the reality of what had happened settling in. There was no more laughing, no more smugness, no more acting like it was all a joke. Just discomfort. A week passed. The first payment came in right on time, my mother's. She was the only one who actually followed through. She sent it without a word, no excuses, no explanations, just the amount she owed. Tom and Kate. At first, they were cold, distant, responding with short messages, acting like I had done something unforgivable. Then, slowly, they started making empty promises. They would give it back soon, they just needed a little time, they were working on it. Then, just as I expected, they disappeared. No more messages. No explanations. They had moved on, hoping that if they ignored it long enough, it would just go away. That I would forget. That I would, once again, let it slide. But I didn't care anymore. I deleted their contacts and left the family chat. I wasn't going to be a wallet for people who didn't respect me anymore.